Hi, Roy here on my channel Roy Reads Anything, which is a booktube channel about old books usually. And this is about an old book. Wasn't planning to do this, but the book is called Judith Teaches, and it's from a series called Career Books for Girls that came out in the mid-1950s. And there you can see a picture of a girl looking thoughtful, contemplating all the marvellous careers, one of which would be teaching in schools. So I was inspired to pick this up and start reading it because Gareth of Books, Songs and Other Magic was talking about celebrating 15 years of qualified teaching status. So salute to Gareth for that achievement. I remembered I had this teaching book, and today I was doubly inspired to talk about it now because went to the chapel, which is an art centre in the town where I live, and one of the cakes it had was called School Cake.
Oh.
School Cake. Which, yeah, so that intrigued me somewhat in that I did go to school, and if this cake had shown up at school as part of school dinners in those days, it would have caused, we would have been beside ourselves. I don't think we would have known how to process such a thing. But for whatever reason, school cake made me think, let's do something about it now. We can have tea. We can have tea and cake with me and Dr. Jenny.
Hello.
And it'll be a nice cozy thing. So these career books, here are some of the other careers you can have. Air hostess Anne, and careers and names. So you could be air hostess Anne. Thinks, is that any good? The Lee twins, beauty students. June Gray, fashion student. Janet Carr, journalist. Pan Stevens, secretary. Sally Grayson, Wren, that's the Women's Navy. Jane, young author. Molly Hilton, library assistant. Valerie, fashion model. Joan goes farming. Sarah joins the Women's Royal Air Force. Kate in advertising, which I've read, previous video. Claire in television. Elizabeth, young policewoman. Student almoner.
Looks like sorry, I'm eating cake.
But not school
Not
cake.
School cake. I've got lemon drizzle cake. An almoner is like a social worker in a hospital.
Okay, sounds like honest work.
Yeah.
And Rennie Goes Riding. So it was a series of careers books. So I've never been a teacher, but I was interested in this one because my work did sort of tangentially involve school teaching, in that I worked for an institution that did teacher training courses. Because my work was in marketing and communications, part of that was about sort of persuading people that this is something they might want to consider for a course to do. Do you think it'd be pretty straightforward that, teaching is a career? There'll be people who want to do it, and there's a qualification you do to get it, so they would apply and come and study it, which is largely true, particularly about primary school teaching, less so about secondary, where there are fewer people, probably because they've been teenagers themselves, fewer people who want to immediately teach teenagers, and then some of the subjects at secondary, there are even fewer people who are qualified to do them, so it's like a sort of a quest to find people. So I was kind of curious as to how encouraging people to think about teaching careers was happening in the 50s in these Bodley Head careers books. So Bodley Head are the publisher. Interesting that in the late 19th century, Bodley Head started out publishing works of, to quote themselves, stylish decadence.
Come on, kids.
So by a writer called Mabel Esther Allen, who wrote loads and loads and loads of children's books, including particularly books set in schools. And I did read that she had been a teacher herself. In fact, I read her autobiography, which might sound like going the game a bit, but I was interested to see, as she's from our region, if she had anything to do with said institution that I used to work to, because that would have made her a really interesting alumni. Alumna. One of the alumni.
Yeah.
But she didn't. She taught. Her teaching was done during the war, when maybe they were just pleased to have anybody. Anyway, I love this as a book physically. Dust Wrapper's got this really nice painting. There is Judith teaching a class, and the way they've done it, it looks as if as a teaching aid she has a gigantic picture of her own head in the classroom.
And why not?
Yes, yeah, that probably was recommended. And I did find myself curiously invested in the adventures of... So basically, 3 young women graduate from an imaginary teacher training college called, I think it's called Illingborough College, and they get a job in a secondary modern, so a brand new secondary modern school. And there's some interesting sort of the times social history stuff, in that a lot of the kids have been transplanted there from the docks. So they're like working class kids who've been moved into this kind of better environment. And it's sort of realistic in that there's like, you know, the Judith isn't delighted that she's teaching the C class to start with, full of kids who, as in her words, might be thick. But she goes on a bit of a journey and gets to sort of, you know, if there's one bit of, I suppose, sort of advice here, is about treating the kids as individuals. And there's stuff that you probably would face as a teacher even today, like how do you deal with exceptional children that you maybe want to nurture and help them out, but without that seeming like favoritism. There's stuff about pushy parents and you know, awkward stuff like kids who are, they're intelligent but they just can't come to school clean, stuff like that. So it's interesting stuff, and there's things that Mabel Esther Allen was interested in herself, like folk dancing and that sort of thing, which it was something else I happened to have read about when that all started at the beginning of the 20th century. It was like a massive innovation, you know, rediscovering things like country dances. So in this, there's even a folk dance festival with a sword dance with real swords.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Blimey. Which must have been pretty exciting. Other things, the swimming gala, Judith Book Week. So Judith hosts a book week, invites an author along, an author who seems rather similar to Mabel Esther Allen herself. Let's see, what name have they given her? Mary Janetta Sheringham. So
they don't ask the library assistant girl from the other book to come in and say why libraries are great.
That would be awesome if there was a crossover with what was her name? Let's see. She was quite early on. Molly Hilton, library assistant, could come bursting through into this. So there is they talk about the local library and stuff like that.
Good.
And the general inspection, the big Jeopardy climax is what would be Ofsted now, was Her Majesty's inspectors in those days. So they come along, and there were 6 of them, 3 men and 3 women, and Judith surveyed them with a sinking heart. Which, oh, which were the English and history ones? Surely not that large, grim-looking woman with the critical expression and the dreadful red hat. And, oh horrors, not the man with the beetling eyebrows and the intimidating way of clearing his throat. The cheerful-looking youngish woman was probably the youngish man was probably the PT specialist, and perhaps the man with the bow tie and the rather long hair was art or music, though there was really no knowing. He was just as likely to be maths or science. So,
No stereotypes there, then.
well, it turns out he's the one, but yeah. So it's good they end up going to Switzerland. So I guess how it did its job as a sort of career encourager was to show some of the foreseeable difficulties of being in this particular career. You know, the sort of, well, what are the kids going to be like? Will you have some troublesome colleagues? How do you actually, where do you live? Because the three protagonists, they live in a flat together called Teacher's Rest, in a house owned by a difficult parent with a difficult child. So jeopardy. So it also makes it, a readable book, how they overcome the obstacles. And there's successes too, like the sword dancing is a great triumph, and one of the pupils is sort of really good at creative writing, and she's nurtured in that, and that works. But then there's another one, she's really good at music, but her family need her to go to work at 15, and that's what's going to happen. So that's the end of it. So it's sort of realism and stuff. I'd love to know if anyone on earth actually read one of these books and actually decided on the job they wanted based on that. This particular copy was a prize, Siddall Methodist Sunday School, 1955, presented to Carol Hall, first prize.
Well done, Carol Hall.
Yeah, well, good. So
good on you, girl.
Did she train to teach and get QTS and be an NQT and all that stuff? But she also somebody put pencil ticks alongside a lot of the other ones as well. So perhaps she became air hostess Anne, or Sarah joins the WRAF. Who can say? So yeah, I peculiarly enjoyed it. I think the only thing that would make them better is Jenny's idea of crossovers between the characters. It would be great if somebody goes to hospital and there is a student almoner comes out and helps, or they visit a farm and there's Joan goes farming, doing the farming. So a sort of careers-y-verse, or sort of careers Avengers. Career Girls Assemble would be fantastic.
It would be fantastic.
Mind you, I've not read enough of the others to know if that didn't happen. I suspect it does. Trip to Switzerland. Why is it always Switzerland, like the chalet school and that? It's like,
why
they can't keep away from the Alps. Why the affinity between school stories and alpine settings?
Apart from the chalet school and that, I don't feel there's actually the affinity that you're seeing.
Every school story has to have something about Switzerland in it. So that was that then. Fun read, satisfied my curiosity. What was a careers book like in the 1950s? And I've got my school cake to consume. Yeah. Light with a tang of lemon. So, improvements that we're giving you include hopefully better sound from this microphone that you can't see.
It's beautiful, I can see it, and it's very gorgeous.
You might even be able to hear what Dr. Jenny's actually saying, rather than just sort of muffled, distant words.
Maybe you wish it were muffled, distant words.
Also, I've noticed I never really know how to finish, and sometimes it just sort of peters out, or sometimes finishes abruptly. So to have something to finish on that I can do, I'm going to give you a random sentence from a sword and sorcery book. So a bit like a fortune cookie, a sword and sorcery cookie, barbarian biscuit. a sentence from a sword and sorcery book, of which I have many behind me. So you can take that as a sort of random, bit like drawing an individual tarot card, I suppose. You know, this might have immense meaning for you to carry forward into the rest of your day or night, or not. So, as the finisher, random sentence from sword and sorcery books, starting with a collection called Savage Heroes, Tales of Sorcery and Black Magic, edited by Eric Pendragon.
Yeah, that's not a pseudonym.
I think this came out in the 1970s, published by Star Books. The random sentences. Jairel squared her shoulders and turned her back upon her vow fulfilled, and without a backward glance set off across the grass towards the tree-hid ruins which held the gate to home. Okay, goodbye everybody. See you next time with something else.